Katie's father begged her not to go. "It's not safe for a woman alone out there," he warned. But Katie was determined to taste freedom before it was too late. On September 27th, 1994, she called home one last time from a payphone in Utah. What she witnessed that night would cost her everything. The year 1994 marked a turning point in American culture, but for women traveling alone, the roads remained dangerous territory. In suburban Denver, Colorado, 32-year-old Katie Ross had spent the last 8 years teaching 3rd grade at Willow Creek Elementary. Her colleagues knew her as reliable, methodical, and utterly predictable. She arrived at school every morning at 7:30, sharp brown bag lunch in hand, lesson plans colour-coded and laminated. Her students adored her patient manner and gentle smile. But what nobody realised was that behind Katie's conventional exterior, a restless spirit was awakening. The transformation began in July when Katie walked past a motorcycle dealership on her way to the grocery store. In the window sat a gleaming 1993 Harley-Davidson Sportster, chrome reflecting the afternoon sun like a beacon calling to her. She stood there for 20 minutes studying every curve and detail. The next day she returned. The day after that she walked inside and asked about financing options. By the following week, Katie Ross owned her first motorcycle. Her father, Gerald Ross, nearly choked on his coffee when she rode up to the family home that Sunday morning. Gerald was a traditional man who believed women belonged in kitchens, not on highways. He had worked 35 years at the steel mill, his hands permanently stained with grease, and his worldview shaped by decades of masculine industrial culture. The sight of his daughter straddling a motorcycle violated everything he understood about proper female behaviour. "Kitty, honey, what in God's name have you done?" Gerald's voice carried that particular mix of disappointment and fear that only fathers can master. "You could get yourself killed on that thing, and travelling alone. No respectable woman does that." But Katie had already made up her mind. She explained her plan to ride from Denver to the Pacific coast, following Route 40 through Utah and Nevada. She would camp under the stars, eat at truck stops, and experience the kind of freedom that had been denied to women for generations. Her mother, Eleanor, worried quietly about highway predators and mechanical breakdowns in remote areas. Her younger brother Derek thought she had lost her mind entirely. The family spent the next month trying to dissuade her. Gerald enlisted help from Pastor Williams, who delivered sermons about women's biblical roles and the dangers of pride. Eleanor showed her newspaper clippings about missing persons and highway murders. Derek offered to accompany her, missing the point entirely. But Katie remained unmoved. She had awakened to something profound about herself, something that demanded expression regardless of social conventions or family fears. Throughout August, Katie prepared meticulously. She took motorcycle safety courses, studied maps, researched campgrounds, and purchased gear. Her apartment filled with camping equipment, road atlases, and guidebooks. She opened checking accounts in cities along her route and arranged for mail forwarding. Most importantly, she bought a leather-bound journal where she planned to document every mile of her journey. September arrived with crisp autumn air and changing leaves. Katie had requested a 3-week leave of absence from school, citing family emergency. Her principal, Mrs. Henderson, approved without question, never suspecting that quiet Katie Ross was planning the adventure of a lifetime. On September 8th, Katie loaded her saddlebags, kissed her parents goodbye despite their protests, and rode west toward the mountains. The first week exceeded her wildest expectations. Colorado's mountain passes challenged her riding skills while rewarding her with breathtaking vistas. She camped beside alpine lakes, chatted with fellow travelers at roadside diners, and filled her journal with observations about landscape and solitude. Each morning brought renewed confidence. Each mile of highway proved that she was stronger and braver than anyone had ever imagined. But by the second week, loneliness began creeping in. The novelty of solitary meals and one-sided conversations with her journal started wearing thin. Katie found herself calling home more frequently, craving connection with familiar voices. Her parents, initially frantic with worry, had begun adjusting to their daughter's unexpected adventure. Eleanor even admitted feeling slightly proud of Katie's courage, though she never said so in Gerald's presence. On September 20th, Katie reached Utah. The landscape transformed into red rock canyons and endless blue sky. She stopped in Moab, mesmerized by the alien beauty of the desert. That evening, camping beneath a canopy of stars more brilliant than any she had ever seen, Katie wrote in her journal about feeling simultaneously insignificant and infinite. She was discovering parts of herself that had been dormant for 32 years. The next few days brought encounters with other travelers that would change everything. At a truck stop outside of Price, Utah, Katie met a group of motorcyclists heading west. The leader introduced himself as Blake Anderson, a weathered man in his late 30s with greying temples and intense blue eyes. His companions were Tyler West, a younger rider with nervous energy, and Connor Davidson, whose easy smile masked something darker beneath the surface. Blake seemed genuinely interested in Katie's journey. He asked thoughtful questions about her route and offered advice about upcoming terrain. His knowledge of Western roads was encyclopedic, and his stories of previous trips captivated her. When he suggested they travel together for mutual safety, Katie hesitated. Her entire journey had been about independence and self-reliance. But something about Blake's quiet confidence and protective manner appealed to her growing desire for companionship. Tyler and Connor seemed less enthused about adding a woman to their group. They exchanged glances Katie didn't fully understand and made jokes that felt vaguely threatening. But Blake shut down their objections with a look that brooked no argument. Whatever hierarchy existed within their group, Blake clearly commanded absolute authority. That night, Katie called home as usual. Her parents detected excitement in her voice as she described her new travelling companions. Eleanor felt relieved that her daughter would no longer be riding alone through dangerous territory. Gerald remained sceptical about strangers with unclear motives, but even he had to admit that group travel offered better security than solitude. The next morning, Katie packed her gear and joined the three men for breakfast at the truck stop diner. Over coffee and eggs, Blake outlined their planned route through Utah's desert regions. He spoke knowledgeably about weather patterns, road conditions, and fuel stops. His competence reassured Katie that she had made the right decision about joining them. What Katie didn't realize was that Blake and his companions were not recreational motorcyclists enjoying scenic tours. They were transporters in a sophisticated drug distribution network that moved narcotics from Mexican suppliers to buyers throughout the western United States. Their motorcycles carried hidden compartments containing methamphetamine, cocaine, and heroin worth hundreds of thousands of dollars. Their frequent trips across state lines provided perfect cover for criminal enterprises that generated enormous profits. Blake had been running this operation for 5 years, recruiting riders who could blend into legitimate motorcycle culture while transporting illegal cargo. Tyler and Connor were seasoned partners who understood the stakes involved. Discovery by law enforcement meant decades in federal prison. Cooperation with authorities meant death at the hands of cartel enforcers. The life they lived required constant vigilance and absolute loyalty to their criminal organization. Katie's unexpected appearance created a dangerous complication. Blake's initial instinct was to decline her request for companionship, but her persistence and innocent enthusiasm made refusal seem suspicious. Better to include her temporarily and manage the situation carefully than risk drawing unwanted attention through rejection. Besides, a clean-cut schoolteacher provided excellent camouflage for their illegal activities. For 3 days, they rode together through Utah's stunning landscape. Katie reveled in the camaraderie and shared experiences she had craved during her solitary journey. The men seemed to accept her presence, though she occasionally caught them in whispered conversations that ceased when she approached. Blake remained charming and attentive, answering her questions about motorcycle maintenance and desert survival with patient expertise. But on September 26th, everything changed. They had stopped for fuel at a remote gas station near the Nevada border when Katie witnessed something that would seal her fate. While Blake and Connor filled their tanks, Tyler received a phone call that agitated him visibly. Katie couldn't hear the conversation, but Tyler's body language suggested serious problems. When he finished the call, Tyler walked directly to Blake and spoke urgently in his ear. What happened next unfolded with terrifying efficiency. Blake and Connor immediately began checking their motorcycles with newfound urgency, paying particular attention to areas Katie had never seen them examine before. They removed panels and inspected hidden spaces with the practiced movements of men familiar with concealment. Connor produced a small electronic device that he used to scan their bikes systematically. Katie watched from the gas station window, confused by their sudden change in behavior. When she approached to ask about their departure time, Blake's manner had transformed completely. Gone was the friendly mentor who had guided her through desert navigation. In his place stood a cold-eyed stranger who studied her with calculating intensity. "We need to talk," Blake said quietly, guiding Katie away from the gas pumps toward a secluded area behind the station. Tyler and Connor flanked them, their casual friendship replaced by something far more sinister. "There's something you need to understand about our situation." Katie's intuition screamed warnings, but she was miles from help in an isolated location with 3 men whose true nature was rapidly becoming apparent. Blake explained in calm, measured tones that they were involved in activities that required absolute discretion. Katie's presence had become problematic, and they needed assurance of her complete silence about everything she had observed. The implied threat was unmistakable. Katie tried to maintain composure while her mind raced through options. She assured Blake that she had seen nothing unusual and would never discuss their travels with anyone. Her teacher instincts kicked in, employing the calm voice she used with agitated students. But Blake's cold stare suggested that promises and reassurances would not be sufficient. That evening they camped in a remote canyon far from any roads or hiking trails. Katie prepared her sleeping bag with hands that trembled slightly, hyper-aware of every sound and movement around their campfire. The men's conversation carried undertones of tension and frequent glances in her direction. When she announced her intention to call home, Blake informed her that cell service was non-existent in their location. Katie retrieved her journal that night and wrote with desperate urgency. If something happened to her, she wanted someone to understand the truth about her disappearance. She documented everything she had observed about Blake's group, their suspicious behavior at the gas station, and her growing fears about their true intentions. She described their appearance, their motorcycles, and the route they had taken through Utah. Her final entry, written by flashlight in her sleeping bag, captured her profound regret about joining the group and her fear that she would never see her family again. She wrote about loving her parents despite their overprotective nature and understanding finally why her father had warned her about dangerous strangers. She folded the journal carefully and placed it in her saddlebag, hoping it would somehow survive whatever fate awaited her. Blake waited until Katie appeared to be sleeping before approaching Tyler and Connor for a whispered conference. They debated options in urgent, hushed tones. Letting Katie go posed unacceptable risks to their operation and their safety. She had seen too much and knew too much about their activities, but killing a schoolteacher from Colorado would bring the intense law enforcement scrutiny that could destroy their entire network. Connor advocated for immediate action, arguing that quick resolution minimized their exposure. Tyler worried about disposal challenges in the remote desert location. Blake weighed all factors with cold calculation, ultimately concluding that Katie's death was necessary for their survival. They would make it appear accidental, perhaps a motorcycle crash in dangerous terrain, and disappear long before anyone discovered her body. Katie never had a chance to implement any escape plan. Blake approached her sleeping bag around 3 a.m, claiming mechanical problems required her immediate attention. When she emerged confused and half awake, Connor struck her from behind with a rock. Tyler helped drag her unconscious body deeper into the canyon while Blake destroyed evidence of their campsite. They spent the next hour staging an elaborate accident scene. Katie's motorcycle was pushed over a cliff edge to simulate a nighttime navigation error. Her body was hidden in a deep crevice that would remain concealed for years. Her personal belongings were scattered to suggest an attempted rescue followed by disorientation and eventual death from exposure. Blake's group departed before dawn, riding hard toward Nevada and their scheduled delivery appointment. They never spoke about Katie again, treating her death as an unfortunate but necessary business decision. Blake reported to his superiors that the transport had proceeded without complications. Tyler and Connor received their payment and began planning their next assignment. Meanwhile, Katie's family waited anxiously for her scheduled phone call. When September 27th passed without contact, Gerald immediately called state police in Utah. But Katie's intended route covered thousands of square miles of remote terrain, and initial search efforts focused on major highways rather than isolated canyons. The vast wilderness that had attracted Katie with its beauty now concealed her fate completely. Months passed without any trace of Katie or her motorcycle. Her family hired private investigators, posted rewards, and traveled to Utah repeatedly to coordinate search efforts with local authorities. Gerald aged years in those first months, consumed by guilt over his inability to protect his daughter and his failure to physically prevent her departure. Eleanor maintained Katie's classroom for an entire semester, unable to accept that her daughter would never return to teaching. The school district eventually hired a replacement, but Eleanor visited regularly to water the plants Katie had cultivated and organise the supplies she had purchased with her own money. The investigation gradually went cold as leads evaporated and resources were redirected to newer cases. Katie's disappearance became another unsolved missing person file in a system overwhelmed by similar tragedies. Her family never stopped hoping, but practical considerations eventually forced them to have Katie declared legally dead and settle her modest estate. Blake's drug operation continued successfully for several more years. Their network expanded to include additional routes and personnel, generating millions in illegal profits. Blake himself accumulated sufficient wealth to retire from active transportation duties, transitioning to a coordination role that minimized his personal risk exposure. Tyler and Connor remained active until 2001, when a federal task force finally penetrated their organization through wiretaps and surveillance. Connor was arrested during a delivery in Phoenix and immediately began cooperating with authorities to reduce his sentence. Tyler fled to Mexico but was eventually extradited and received a 25-year federal prison term. Blake avoided prosecution through careful compartmentalization of his criminal activities and lack of direct evidence linking him to specific transactions. He relocated to Oregon, purchased a legitimate business, and appeared to live a respectable middle-class lifestyle. His past remained buried along with Katie's body in the Utah desert. For 18 years, Blake believed he had successfully escaped consequences for his crimes. He married, raised children, and became a respected member of his community. Former associates who might have implicated him were dead, imprisoned, or had disappeared into witness protection programs. The statute of limitations on most drug charges had expired, and Katie's murder appeared to be a perfect crime. But in 2012, the federal government began developing new wilderness areas for recreation and mineral exploration. Environmental surveys required comprehensive mapping of remote regions that had never been thoroughly explored. Advanced satellite imaging technology could now detect minute changes in terrain and vegetation patterns that suggested human activity. In July 2012, a geological survey team discovered metal debris in a canyon that satellite imagery had flagged for investigation. The twisted remains of Katie's motorcycle were immediately recognizable as evidence of human tragedy rather than natural phenomena. Within hours, FBI agents and forensic specialists were en route to the site. Katie's body was recovered 3 days later, along with her saddlebags and personal belongings. Her leather journal had survived 18 years in the dry desert climate, its pages yellowed but entirely readable. FBI agents found themselves reading Katie's increasingly desperate documentation of her final days, including detailed descriptions of Blake, Tyler, and Connor. The journal provided investigators with precise information about the timeline of Katie's disappearance and the identities of her companions. Modern computer databases allowed rapid cross-referencing of names, motorcycle registrations, and criminal histories. Within a week, agents had identified Blake Anderson and begun surveillance of his Oregon residence. But Blake had grown complacent during his years of apparent security. He had maintained his motorcycle hobby and frequently participated in rallies and charity rides throughout the Pacific Northwest. His current lifestyle provided numerous opportunities for undercover agents to approach him naturally and gather evidence about his past activities. Connor Davidson had been released from federal prison in 2009 after serving his sentence for drug trafficking. He had relocated to Arizona and attempted to build a legitimate life as a motorcycle mechanic. When FBI agents appeared at his shop with Katie's journal and photographs from the crime scene, Connor's carefully constructed new identity crumbled instantly. Faced with potential murder charges and life imprisonment, Connor agreed to cooperate fully with the investigation. He provided detailed testimony about Blake's drug operation, Katie's final days, and the decision to kill her. His account corroborated every detail Katie had written in her journal, creating an ironclad case against Blake. Tyler West had died in federal prison in 2007, eliminating him as both a witness and a potential defendant. But Connor's cooperation provided prosecutors with sufficient evidence to charge Blake with first-degree murder, kidnapping, and continuing criminal enterprise violations. Blake's arrest in October 2012 shocked his Oregon community. Neighbors and business associates struggled to reconcile the quiet family man they knew with the cold-blooded killer described in federal indictments. His wife filed for divorce within days of his arrest, claiming complete ignorance of his criminal past. The trial began in March 2013, with Katie's family finally learning the truth about their daughter's fate. Gerald Ross, now 73 years old and suffering from heart problems, testified about his final conversation with Katie and his decades of unanswered questions. Eleanor, despite her advanced age, attended every day of proceedings, clutching Katie's recovered journal like a sacred relic. Prosecutors presented overwhelming evidence of Blake's guilt, including Connor's detailed testimony, Katie's journal entries, and forensic evidence from the crime scene. Blake's defense attorneys argued that Connor's testimony was unreliable due to his own criminal history and motivation to reduce his sentence. But Katie's own words, written hours before her death, provided unimpeachable testimony against her killer. The jury deliberated for only 6 hours before returning guilty verdicts on all charges. Blake received life imprisonment without possibility of parole, ensuring he would die in federal custody. Connor received a reduced sentence of 15 years in exchange for his cooperation, though he would remain under federal supervision for the rest of his life. Katie's family finally had answers after 18 years of uncertainty and grief. Her body was returned to Colorado for burial in the family plot beside her grandparents. Her journal was preserved as evidence but eventually returned to the family as a testament to her courage and final act of defiance against her killers. Gerald Ross died 6 months after Blake's conviction, having finally found the peace that had eluded him since 1994. Eleanor lived until 2016, spending her final years establishing a scholarship fund in Katie's memory for young women pursuing education degrees. The Katie Ross Memorial Fund continues to help aspiring teachers achieve their dreams while honouring the memory of a brave woman who died pursuing her own. Blake Anderson remains in federal prison, serving his life sentence at a Dick Florence in Colorado. He has never expressed remorse for Katie's murder or acknowledged the devastation his actions caused her family. His former associates have either died, been imprisoned, or disappeared into witness protection programs. The drug network he once commanded has been dismantled completely. Katie's story serves as a reminder that justice, though sometimes delayed, can still prevail even decades after crimes are committed. Her courage in documenting her final days provided the evidence necessary to convict her killer and bring closure to her family's long nightmare. In death, she achieved the justice that had been denied to her in life, ensuring that her killer would face consequences for his actions. The discovery of Katie's journal had revealed far more than just the identity of her killers. Hidden within her detailed daily entries were clues to a much larger criminal conspiracy that had operated undetected for decades. But what investigators found next would shock even seasoned federal agents who thought they had seen everything. As FBI forensic specialists carefully examined each page of Katie's recovered journal, they noticed something peculiar about her final entries. Katie had not only documented Blake's suspicious behavior at the gas station, but she had also recorded specific details about license plates, phone numbers overheard during conversations, and locations of previous stops where the group had conducted mysterious business meetings. Her teacher's instinct for detailed observation had inadvertently created a comprehensive intelligence file on one of the largest drug distribution networks in the western United States. Katie had written down names, dates, times, and locations with the same methodical precision she used for lesson planning. What she thought were innocent travel notes were actually evidence of a criminal enterprise worth millions of dollars. But the most chilling discovery came on page 47 of Katie's journal. 3 days before her death, she had written about overhearing a phone conversation between Tyler and an unknown caller. The conversation had been brief but disturbing. Tyler had mentioned something about cleaning up loose ends and making sure no witnesses remained from the Colorado situation. Investigators realized that Katie may not have been Blake's first victim. Her journal entry suggested that the group had previously eliminated someone in Colorado, possibly another innocent traveler who had witnessed their illegal activities. This revelation transformed the case from a single murder investigation into a potential serial killing inquiry that could span multiple states and decades. FBI agents immediately began reviewing unsolved missing person cases throughout Colorado, Utah, Nevada, and Arizona, dating back to 1989. They focused specifically on solo travelers, motorcyclists, and individuals who had disappeared along major drug trafficking routes. The results were horrifying. Over a dozen cases showed similarities to Katie's disappearance, including last known locations near truck stops where Blake's group had been reported operating. Among these cases was the 1991 disappearance of Marcus Webb, a 28-year-old accountant from Phoenix who had been motorcycling through Colorado when he vanished without a trace. His abandoned campsite had been discovered near the same truck stop where Katie first encountered Blake's group. Like Katie, Marcus had been travelling alone and documenting his journey in a personal diary that was never recovered. Another case involved Sarah Chen, a 34-year-old photographer from California who disappeared in Utah during 1993. Sarah had been following the same route Katie would later travel, photographing desert landscapes for a magazine assignment. Her camera equipment was found at a gas station, but Sarah herself had vanished completely. Witnesses remembered seeing her talking with a group of motorcyclists matching Blake's description. As investigators dug deeper into these cold cases, a pattern emerged that painted Blake Anderson as a calculated serial killer who used his drug trafficking operation as cover for eliminating potential witnesses. His method was always the same: approach solo travelers under the guise of offering assistance or companionship, gain their trust over several days, then murder them when they became liabilities to his criminal enterprise. Connor Davidson, faced with the evidence of multiple murders, provided even more damaging testimony about Blake's true nature. He revealed that Blake had boasted about handling problems throughout their partnership, though Connor claimed he had never witnessed the actual killings. According to Connor, Blake viewed murder as a business necessity rather than a moral consideration, eliminating threats with the same cold calculation he applied to drug transactions. The revelation that Katie was one of multiple victims devastated her family even further. Gerald Ross, already struggling with guilt over his daughter's death, became consumed with rage over the systematic nature of Blake's crimes. Eleanor found some comfort in knowing that Katie's courage in documenting her final days had helped expose a serial killer who might have continued murdering indefinitely. But investigators were not finished uncovering Blake's secrets. A thorough examination of his financial records revealed a sophisticated money laundering operation that had moved millions of dollars through legitimate businesses over 2 decades. Blake had used his drug profits to purchase real estate, invest in stock markets, and establish front companies that provided perfect cover for his criminal activities. His Oregon business, Mountain View Motorcycle Repair, had served as more than just a legitimate enterprise. Federal agents discovered hidden rooms containing drug processing equipment, weapons, and detailed records of criminal transactions dating back to 1988. Blake had maintained meticulous files on every aspect of his operation, including photographs and personal information about his victims. Among these files was a folder labeled Travel Companions that contained newspaper clippings about missing persons cases, including Katie's disappearance. Blake had apparently collected information about his victims as trophies, studying media coverage of their disappearances and law enforcement investigations. The folder also contained photographs that Blake had secretly taken of Katie during their time together, images that captured her growing unease as she began to suspect something was wrong. Perhaps most disturbing was Blake's detailed journal, written in a code that took FBI cryptographers several weeks to decipher. Once translated, the journal revealed the mind of a psychopath who viewed other human beings as obstacles to be removed when they interfered with his business interests. His entries about Katie were particularly chilling, describing her as overly curious and potential liability requiring permanent solution. Blake had planned Katie's murder for days before executing it, considering various methods and disposal options. He had researched the canyon where her body was hidden, determining that it provided optimal concealment while minimizing his risk of discovery. His journal entries showed no remorse or emotional reaction to killing Katie, treating her death as simply another business transaction that required careful planning and execution. The financial investigation also revealed that Blake had been paying bribes to corrupt law enforcement officers in multiple states, ensuring that investigations into missing persons cases would be conducted with minimal effort and resources. These officers had deliberately misdirected search efforts, withheld evidence, and discouraged family members from pursuing private investigations. When confronted with evidence of their corruption, several officers agreed to cooperate with federal investigators in exchange for reduced sentences. Their testimony revealed the scope of Blake's influence within law enforcement agencies and explained why so many missing person cases had remained unsolved for decades. Detective Ray Morrison from the Utah State Police was among those who had accepted Blake's bribes. Morrison had been assigned to Katie's case in 1994 and had deliberately focused search efforts on areas where he knew her body would never be found. He had also discouraged Gerald Ross from hiring private investigators, claiming that such efforts would interfere with official police work. Morrison's corruption had extended far beyond Katie's case. He had received regular payments from Blake to ensure that drug trafficking investigations were compromised and potential witnesses were not properly protected. His actions had allowed Blake's criminal enterprise to operate with impunity for years, while families of missing persons suffered without answers. The revelation of law enforcement corruption added another layer of tragedy to Katie's story. Her family realized that their daughter might have been found years earlier if investigators had pursued the case with integrity and determination. Gerald Ross filed civil lawsuits against corrupt officers and their departments, though the legal battles would consume years of his remaining life. As Blake's trial approached, prosecutors faced the challenge of presenting evidence from multiple murder cases without overwhelming the jury with excessive details. They decided to focus primarily on Katie's case, while introducing evidence from other victims to establish a pattern of criminal behavior. Katie's journal remained the centerpiece of their case, providing unimpeachable testimony from beyond the grave. Blake's defense team attempted to argue that their client was being scapegoated for unsolved crimes committed by other individuals. They claimed that Connor Davidson was fabricating testimony to avoid responsibility for his own criminal actions. But the physical evidence was overwhelming, and Blake's own coded journal provided detailed confessions to multiple murders. During the trial, Katie's journal was read aloud in its entirety, bringing her voice back to life in the courtroom where her killer faced justice. Jurors listened in stunned pendency, as Katie's words revealed her growing fear and desperation during her final days. Her descriptions of Blake's transformation from friendly companion to cold-eyed predator painted a vivid picture of evil hiding behind a charming facade. The families of Blake's other victims attended the trial, finally learning the truth about their loved ones' fates. Marcus Webb's elderly parents had spent 22 years wondering what happened to their son. Sarah Chen's sister had never stopped searching for answers about her disappearance. For all of them, Blake's conviction provided long-awaited closure while confirming their worst fears about their family members' suffering. Blake showed no emotion as victim impact statements were read by surviving family members. Gerald Ross, despite his advanced age and failing health, delivered a powerful statement about the devastating impact of losing Katie and the additional pain caused by years of uncertainty. His words brought tears to the eyes of everyone in the courtroom except Blake, who stared straight ahead with apparent indifference. Eleanor Ross spoke about her daughter's courage and determination, qualities that had led to both her death and ultimately her killer's conviction. She described Katie as a woman who refused to be silenced even in death, whose final act of defiance had exposed a serial killer and brought justice to multiple families. Her testimony honored Katie's memory while emphasizing the importance of her sacrifice. The sentencing phase revealed even more disturbing details about Blake's criminal history. Federal investigators had linked him to at least 8 murders spanning 15 years, though the actual number of victims may have been much higher. His drug trafficking operation had supplied narcotics to distributors in dozens of cities, contributing to addiction epidemics that destroyed countless lives and families. Judge Patricia Williams, a veteran federal judge with 30 years of experience, called Blake's crimes among the most heinous she had ever encountered. She noted that his systematic elimination of innocent witnesses demonstrated a level of calculated evil that warranted the harshest possible punishment. Her sentencing statement emphasized that Blake's actions had not only murdered individuals, but had also devastated entire families and corrupted law enforcement institutions. Blake was ultimately sentenced to multiple life terms without possibility of parole, ensuring that he would never again pose a threat to innocent travelers or potential witnesses. Additional federal charges related to drug trafficking, money laundering, and corruption resulted in sentences totaling over 400 years in prison. Even if his murder convictions were somehow overturned, Blake would remain incarcerated for the rest of his natural life. The aftermath of Blake's conviction led to comprehensive reforms in missing person investigations and multi-jurisdictional cooperation. Katie's case became a study model for law enforcement agencies, demonstrating how systematic investigation of cold cases could reveal connections between seemingly unrelated crimes. Her journal was preserved as evidence of how ordinary citizens could provide crucial assistance to criminal investigations through careful observation and documentation. The families of Blake's victims established a foundation dedicated to supporting missing person investigations and providing assistance to families facing similar tragedies. The Katie Ross Foundation has funded search efforts, provided resources for family members, and advocated for improved law enforcement training and accountability. Their work ensures that Katie's legacy extends far beyond her own case to help other families find answers and justice. Today, federal agents continue investigating Blake's criminal activities, seeking to identify additional victims and uncover the full scope of his crimes. Advanced DNA analysis and computer modeling have revealed new connections between unsolved cases and Blake's known movements. Each discovery brings closure to another family, while adding to the comprehensive understanding of one of America's most prolific serial killers. Katie's story has been featured in numerous documentaries, books, and law enforcement training materials. Her courage in documenting her final days despite growing fear has inspired other potential witnesses to come forward with information about criminal activities. Law enforcement agencies now emphasize the importance of detailed record-keeping by travelers and encourage citizens to report suspicious behavior even when they are unsure of its significance. The remote canyon where Katie's body was discovered has been designated as a memorial site honoring all victims of violent crime along America's highways. A bronze plaque bears Katie's name alongside those of Blake's other identified victims, ensuring that their stories will not be forgotten by future generations of travelers. The site serves as both a memorial to the innocent and a warning about the dangers that can lurk behind friendly facades. Blake Anderson remains in federal prison, serving his life sentences in solitary confinement for his own protection. He has never expressed remorse for his crimes or provided information about additional victims. His refusal to cooperate with ongoing investigations means that some families may never learn the truth about their missing loved ones, but his conviction has prevented him from claiming any additional victims. The mountain highway where Katie began her final journey still attracts motorcyclists seeking adventure and freedom. But her story serves as a powerful reminder that courage and careful observation can triumph over evil, even when justice seems impossible. Katie Ross died pursuing her dreams, but her final act of defiance ensured that her killer would face consequences and that other families would find the answers she had fought so hard to preserve. Katie's journal, now preserved in the FBI archives, continues to inspire investigators and families of missing persons worldwide. Her meticulous documentation proved that ordinary citizens can make extraordinary contributions to justice, even in their darkest moments. The courage she showed in those final days, writing by flashlight while fearing for her life, demonstrates the power of truth to survive even when its author cannot. If Katie's story has moved you, or if you know someone who might benefit from hearing about her courage and legacy, please consider sharing this video with them. These stories of justice and remembrance deserve to reach as many people as possible. Subscribe to our channel for more true crime documentaries that honor victims while seeking truth and justice. In the comments below, let us know what you think about Katie's bravery in documenting her final days, and whether you believe her actions helped bring closure to other families affected by Blake's crimes. Remember, Katie's legacy lives on through the foundation that bears her name and the countless investigators who continue to seek justice for the missing. Her story reminds us that even in our most vulnerable moments, we have the power to make a difference that can last for generations. Thank you for watching and for keeping Katie's memory alive through your attention to her remarkable story.